So there is a deadline looming to avoid a government shutdown. Congress must pass a spending bill this Friday to continue to fund the government. But there are a couple of key issues that could put that bill in jeopardy. So let's bring back our panel. We have Ron Brownstein, Jackie Kucinich, and David Sanger. So, Jackie, one of the issues that seems as though it is nettlesome is the border wall and who's going to pay for it. President Trump now wants Congress to pay $1.4 billion for the border wall. So how's that going to work?
Not well. So Congress they have been negotiating this spending bill for quite a bit. Democrats and Republicans trying to get to a deal to keep the government funded. This throws a wrench into that. Back in March, Senate Democrats sent Republicans a letter saying that this is a non-starter. They're not going to vote for something. You heard Nancy Pelosi, that includes funding for a border wall. You heard Nancy Pelosi this weekend say the same thing. You've heard Republicans say that more moderate Republicans that this is not something that should be part of a spending bill. So you might be able to see, a coalition of Democrats and Republicans that don't want to vote for something that funds the border wall, which is a huge problem for keeping the government funded if they insist that this be in there.
Somebody did a little enterprise reporting and they couldn't find a representative along the border who wanted that. And one of the reasons, Ron, is that it's not a one-time payment. This is just the first installment. So what do you see down the road? There's every expectation there will not be a government shutdown, but it's going to be a short-term solution, which means it could come back to haunt in the next phase of health care, right? Or the next phase if they get far enough for tax policy. What do you see here?
Well, look, the wall, as Jackie said, I mean, if they want to go to the wall, over the wall, they will shut down the government because they need 8 Democratic votes in the Senate to pass the continuing resolution to keep the government open. And it is hard to imagine there are ever 8 Democratic votes for the wall, particularly because it faces such resistance in public opinion. In Quinnipiac polling, it's at 1/3, 33% of the country say they support the wall, 64% oppose the wall. And as you note, when the Wall Street Journal just surveyed both border state representatives and Senate members from both parties, they could not find anyone who supported including the funding here. So this is something that does matter to the president, that did matter to his base, but it is indicative of the larger problem that we talked about, which is that many elements of this agenda, this kind of defining this economic and kind of racially tinged nationalism, it really appeals, it has a strong appeal to a certain portion of the public, but there are big portions, a larger portion of the public, in many, not all cases, who feel that it kind of violates what they consider their vision of America, and it puts an upward ceiling, a limit on the president's ability to grow his coalition.
David Sanger, another defining promise, certainly of the campaign, was repeal and replace Obamacare. And Reince Priebus was out on the Sunday shows yesterday giving a very optimistic timeline for when we'll see the next plan. Let me play this for you.
I would like to have a vote this week, and I think the leadership knows that we'd like to have a vote this week, but it's not, on Monday we're still going to be here working for the American people. So whether health care repeal and replace comes on Friday or Saturday or on Monday, in the grand scheme of things, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we're hopeful for this week, but again, it's not something that has to happen in order to define our success.
David, this messaging is so confusing because you hear from members of Congress, no, we're not close. And then you hear the president and Reince Priebus say, oh, yeah, maybe by Monday or certainly by Friday or Saturday we could have a vote. Why are they setting that expectation?
Well, they're setting it because it's critical to their 100-day measure. But I think they're discovering that the lesson of this first 100 days is if you go into something as complex as health care, and it was the president who said, who knew this was so complicated? Well, I think almost anybody who had looked at it knew it was this complicated. That they're almost setting themselves up to repeat the same mistake if you think it's going to get less complicated by Friday, Saturday, or Monday. And there's a reason that it took the Obama administration a year and a half before they got their first bill through. It is incredibly complicated, and I think the lesson of the first 100 days is no one wants to throw out the old system until they see what the new system looks like. One point back on the border wall very, very quickly. This is a president who got elected on a national security agenda. And what he hasn't managed to do is explain why this $1.4 billion and the billions that would follow fit at the top of that national security agenda. he has never actually really made that case. It's more about the nationalism, it's more about the politics of the campaign, and I think that almost everybody on his staff who has looked at this recognizes there are other fights in national security they'd much rather be pursuing.
Well, and that seems to be a little bit of the tail of the tape here, doesn't it? I mean, you have a lot of the people who do support the president's wall are now calling it an analogy. You know, that it's not just the wall, except they're going to be putting dollars towards an analogy. No, it's going to be bricks and mortar. It's going to be a problem. But, Jackie, do you think that a part of this tail of the tape is he wasn't able to find a big deal that he could get consensus on? If we look at Obama, he came in at an unprecedentedly bad time economically, but within those first 100 days, they got the stimulus done because there was consensus. Something needed to be done. There was urgency. Everybody was on the same page. We haven't seen that here.
Well, because a lot of it was sort of false urgency. You know, the one thing he has done when it comes to national security, the border crossings are down, partially because of his rhetoric. Daily Beast has done a lot of reporting on that issue in particular. But, you know, I don't think his people are going to punish him for this. You're going to hear them say, you know, it's the swamp. That said, it's you know, as we've seen with several of the measures that he's tried to push, it's easier said than done.
David Sanger, very quickly, we're just getting word that President Trump is hosting a highly unusual lunch today, we're told, with ambassadors of the UN Security Council nations. What do you know about this?
Well, this is going to be interesting because the UN and particularly the Security Council were not at the high list of his favorites during the campaign. Look, he is about to come up by the end of the week on a significant move to try to tighten things down on North Korea. He's sending Rex Tillerson up to the UN to personally chair that Security Council meeting. And I think he's got to show the Security Council members two things. First, that he's not about to go do something that's out of the ordinary with North Korea. He's not interested in preemptive attack and so forth. And secondly, that he respects and is willing to work within their opinions and rules. And so my guess is this is a lunch you're not going to hear a whole lot of details about from the White House. I bet you will hear a lot from the participants.
All right, fellas, appreciate it. Jackie, appreciate it as always. French voters
Honorary fellow.
pushing the, well,